October 5, 1992 Observer Newsletter, Steiner serious injury. SHIRE and KANGAROO die. Record low ratings. By Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228 Campbell, California 950091228. October 5, 1992. Rick Steiner underwent surgery on Monday in Birmingham for a badly torn pectoralis major muscle. The pec was apparently ripped from the sternum, which is an injury that has finished many world-class bench pressers. No word on how the injury took place other than it took place during an IWGP Tag Team title defense in Yokohama, Japan against Hiroshi Hashi and Kensuke Sasaki on September 23. The only word on a recovery period was that it's expected to be at least 6 weeks, but most likely he'll be out of action for the duration of his contract, which expires in about 90 days. This in reality means there is a better than even chance he's wrestled his last match for WCW. During the interim, Scott Steiner will wrestle as a single. It's ironic a major injury like this would take place amidst controversy over Watts eliminating the medical insurance and workmen's compensation benefits to the wrestlers who signed new contracts. Under the new system, if the Steiners were to have signed the offer on the table to them and this injury were to have taken place early next year, not only would Rick Steiner have to pay for both the operation and rehab, but he also wouldn't be getting paid until he returns to the ring. Both pro wrestling television ratings and house show attendance most likely hit all-time lows this past week in North America. The average cable rating for a weekend, which set a record low of 1.72 on the weekend of September 12 to 14, dipped below that figure for a 1.68 average over the weekend of September 19 to 21. In addition, while no accurate records can be used to verify this, I strongly suspect that pro wrestling attendance in North America was at its lowest point in decades this week. With the possible exception of a WWF television taping in Brandon, Manitoba on Tuesday, which we received no report on how well it drew. There wasn't a show in North America during the past week that drew 3,000 paid. The WWF ran one show per night, generally headlined by Ultimate Warrior vs. Cmll, none of which drew well. WCW shows drew between 900 and 1,500 with the exception of a slightly better crowd in Jacksonville, and there was little in the way of independent houses. From a television standpoint, it's not a safe assumption that viewership hit an all-time low this past week, but fact. The two WWF cable shows, All-American and Primetime, drew 1.9 and 1.8 ratings respectively. In reality, All-American had been doing in this neighborhood much of the summer, while Primetime was going against formidable competition of a strong Monday night football game, Bears-Giants, and the much-publicized Murphy-Brown season premiere. It's a safe bet those numbers will increase a little this coming week. On the WCW side, things look even worse. WCW Saturday night, with a strongly pushed Steiners vs. Anderson and Eaton match, only drew a 1.9, while the real disaster of the week was Sunday's main event doing a 1.3, its second lowest in history. A few years back, going head-to-head with the Super Bowl, a main event showed, did a 1.1. Even with a Rhodes and Wyndham and Koloff vs. Roberts and Barbarian and Cactus Jack headliner, Power Hour increased from the previous 2 weeks to a 1.5. Of the three main shows in comparison to the same weekend 1 year ago, main event was preempted that weekend last year, ratings were down on an average 24%, even though overall television viewership, of all TV shows, during those same time slots was higher this year than last year, so trying to use weather or anything else as an excuse to explain declining wrestling ratings doesn't hold any water. In fact, just the opposite is true. If this kind of a trend holds up, it's nothing short of disastrous for this business, since syndicated slots are being dropped and demoted left and right already, and wrestling overall is clearly in the midst of its deepest depression in decades. The only bright spot among the US groups is that the WWF had a crew in Germany this past week, and since most of the cities were first-time visits, the shows no doubt all either sold out or came very close to doing so, and did huge merchandise business. Two major names in pro wrestling passed away this past week, both reportedly from heart attacks. Roy Shire, who was a big-name wrestler around Ohio and in the Southeast during the 1950s but is no doubt most famous for his 20-year stint running the San Francisco territory during the 60s and 70s, passed away this past weekend at the age of 71. Shire had been hospitalized for approximately 10 days, suffering a mild heart attack on September 16, and a massive heart attack 4 days later. Roy Heffernan, half of the famous Fabulous Kangaroos tag team in the 50s and early 60s with Al Costello, passed away on September 24 at the age of 67. Shire's most fame in the ring came as part of the Shire Brothers tag team with brother Ray Stevens, during the late 1950s, including working a program in Georgia with boxing great Archie Moore. In 1961, Shire came to San Francisco and produced a television show on KTVU, the leading independent station in the market, and immediately became one of the major promoters in the world, as his shows at San Francisco's Cow Palace were the biggest drawing in the country at that point in time. Ray Stevens was brought in as top heel, and his first card drew in excess of 16,000 fans to the Cow Palace. During 1962, SHIRE averaged $14,000 and $40,000 per show, at the time an unheard-of figure by the money standards of the time, drawing more than $1 million to the Cow Palace, and another $1 million at Northern California spot shows. While never coming close to equaling those figures as an average, the SHIRE promotion remained one of the tops in the country through the mid-70s, when a combination of losing strong television, using a lower quality of talent, and an inability to replace Pat Patterson, who left in 1975, as the top draw led to dwindling attendance throughout the circuit, although the Cow Palace shows stayed strong, often drawing 8,000 and more for several more years, and a few in excess of 12,000 for Battle Royals or the peak of the Bob Roop-Kevin Sullivan feud. SHIRE gave up promoting a territory in the late 1970s, but continued to promote at the Cow Palace, forging alliances first with Don Owen in Oregon, Bob Geigel in Kansas City, and finally Eddie Graham in Florida. The first two alliances were disastrous, and the third, which had potential, was given up on after just 3 shows because Vern Gagne started running shows across the Bay in Oakland, and SHIRE gave up rather than try to compete with him. SHIRE gained some publicity years later when he exposed the business on many television stations and in a Los Angeles Times interview because of bitterness against the WWF, in a futile effort to kill wrestling in California, with the result being just the opposite. Heffernan, known as the father of Australian wrestling, was part of one of the most innovative tag teams in history in the late 1950s with partner Costello and manager Wild Red Berry. The Kangaroos were major headliners throughout the U.S., but in particular in the Northeast, with famous feuds against Mark Lewin and Don Curtis, Argentina Rocca and Miguel Perez, and Skull Murphy and Brute Bernard. The duo used to throw cardboard boomerangs to the fans and were a semi-scientific heel team. Heffernan, originally a weightlifter, once doing a 395-pound deadlift at the age of 14, was the power, while Costello was the more classic wrestler of the two. The duo in some ways can be considered a forerunner of the Midnight Express tag team of the late 1980s, in that Berry was the first manager who was an interview specialist. The duo were heels that actually utilized more innovative moves in the ring than the babyfaces, and Heffernan, like Bobby Eaton, never spoke during the interviews. The two remained together until the mid-1960s, when Heffernan returned home to Australia and was a local favorite for Jim Barnett's national promotion, which had a successful run. Heffernan wrestled, promoted and trained wrestlers in the Sydney area. Costello stayed in the U.S. and reprised the fabulous Kangaroos tag team in the Detroit area with Don Kent and manager George Crybaby Cannon. Before coming to the U.S., Heffernan was the one of top babyfaces in Australia and had famous feuds with the likes of Killer Kowalski, Mario Milano, Skull Murphy, and Brute Bernard. His most famous match, however, was in Bombay, India, against legendary Dara Singh before a crowd that legend has it was 100,000 fans, and supposedly the match was so famous in India that the tape was made into a movie which played for 3 months in Bombay theaters. Heffernan, who among the boys was even more legendary for his ability to outdrink anyone, retired from wrestling in 1971. He'd been in rough shape for the past few months after breaking his back in an accident earlier this year. New Japan announced the complete lineup for the 1992 Tag Team Tournament, which takes place from October 8 to October 21. The lineup was changed completely from a few weeks back when the foreigners were announced. The teams will be Tatsumi Fujinami and Big Van Vader, who won the 1991 tournament, Riki Choshu and Shinya Hashimoto, Masa Chono, and Tony Halme, Super Strong Machine, and Scott Norton, Hiroshi Hazi and Kensuke Sasaki, Keiji Muto and Bam Bam Bigelow and Tom Zenk and Jim Neidhart. Sasaki and Chono will depart for the U.S. immediately after the tournament and tour for WCW from October 22 in Cincinnati through October 31 in Chicago, including both working at Halloween Havoc. New Japan also held a major show this past Wednesday night, September 23, at the Yokohama Arena before a sellout 17,010 fans. With ringside at $160, the gate was probably in the $1.5 million range. The show was said to have been a major disappointment, although there were some upset finishes in the undercard. The Samoans, Kokina and Semu, put over Super Strong Machine and Tatsutoshi Goto in a surprise, since both are WWF bound, so this was their final match in Japan for the foreseeable future. In the following match, El Samurai and Koji Kanemoto beat Jushin Liger and Hiroyoshi Yamamoto in what was a surprise finish, with Samurai pinning Liger, and not Yamamoto, with the Hurricane Rana, similar to the Frankensteiner. After that, Scott Norton earned a shot at the IWGP World Heavyweight title on October 18 by pinning Tony Halme in 9:15 with a power slam. The final match before intermission saw the Skinheads, Shiro Koshinaka and Kengo Kimura, and Akatoshi Saito and Masashi Aoyagi, all now with either crew cuts or shaved bald heads, beat Choshu and Fujinami and Takayuki Iizuka and Osamu Kido, when Koshinaka pinned Kido. Before the match started, War wrestlers Masao Orihara and Tatsumi Kitahara wearing suits and ties came to ringside and sat in the front row with tickets challenging the skinheads. After the card, Choshu Orihara and Kitahara held a surprise press conference basically putting the next step in the angle which will presumably lead to the Choshu vs Genichiro Tenryu match at the Tokyo Dome on January 4, 1993. It's expected Tenryu will make a surprise appearance, probably at the November Sumo Hall card. After intermission came the Great Muta vs Hashimoto match for the IWGP World title, which was said to have been terrible with no heat. Muta worked as a total heel to the point where he didn't show his skill, which was a negative for the crowd. In fact, it was so overboard that they barely locked up for the first 8 minutes. Muta ended up using a lead pipe from underneath the ring, put it in his knee pad and came off the top rope with 5 knee drops in a row on Hashimoto and then pinned him with a moonsault in 14:59. There was no reaction at all to the finish. The next match was said to have been the best one on the show, with the Steiners retaining the IWGP Tag titles, beating Hazy and Sasaki in 1915, when Scott pinned Sasaki with the Frankensteiner. The finale was Chono vs Steve Austin for the NWA title. About 5 minutes in, they did the spot where Austin reversed a tombstone piledriver and gave Chono the tombstone. Austin took the bump wrong and Chono's head was in the wrong place or something, but Chono was injured and couldn't do much the rest of the match. It turned out to be a major disappointment for a main event on a big show, with Chono winning via submission with the STF in 15:08. It was thought Chono suffered either a jammed neck or a pinched nerve in his neck from the accident in the ring. It was the last night of the tour, so he didn't have another match until October 8, and it was expected he'd be in the ring for the tag tournament, and his US tour doesn't appear to be in any jeopardy. Some notes on last week's major shows. The EMLL anniversary card was also considered a big disappointment, as noted last week. The biggest disappointment had to be the crowd, approximately 11,500, so they came nowhere close to selling out. Considering they've drawn a few sellouts already this year with regular cards, it shows just how disappointing this was, and how much the popularity of EMLL has been hurt by AAA. The FMW show at Yokohama Baseball Stadium on September 19 drew a paid attendance of between 25,000 and 27,000. Apparently a high percentage of the crowd was first-timers who came because it was a big show just to see the celebrity Onita, since the crowd reacted better to the simple spots than the complex spots, which is untraditional for Japan. In addition, there was said to have been little heat until the big names to the general public came out, like Shoji Nakamaki, who was a famous author before becoming a wrestler, Bull Nakano and Onita. Apparently after the women's tag match, which was the highlight of the card, Nakano grabbed the house mic and said something to the effect of, "If you want to see more matches like this, come see All Japan Women cards," which was pretty funny. All Japan Women gained a lot of new fans over the past 2 years by appearing on men's cards and putting on the best matches on the shows, thereby winning over the male wrestling fans that traditionally had shunned the group in years past. In one of the underneath matches, which was a street fight death match, the Japanese threesome of Samba Asako and Great Punk and Ricky Fuji all came out wearing 3-piece suits and ties. It was funny to see the photo of 350-pound Asako wearing a suit doing a cross-body off the top and a tope out of the ring. Pro Wrestling Fujiwara-gumi has its biggest undertaking since it formed on October 4 at the Tokyo Egg Dome. I've heard 2 different reports this past 2 days. One is that they've just sold 7,000 tickets and it's on the way to being the biggest disaster ever at the Dome and are padding the building like crazy just to make it look respectable. And the other that they just topped the 25,000 mark in sales and everyone is really happy with how it's going. Results. September 19, Gastonia, North Carolina, USWF. 132, Shy Taylor B. San Antonio Rose, Funktown Kid B. Jim White, JW Steele D. L.A. Stevens, Jimmy Valiant B. David Isley DQ, Emilio Olacia 1 Battle Royal. September 19, Indianapolis, WWF, 2,350, Jim Powers B. Cato, Rick Martel B. Virgil, Legion of Doom Animal and Crush and Paul Ellering B. Brooklyn Brawler and Blake Beverly and Genius, WWF title, Ultimate Warrior B. Ric Flair DQ, Bret Hart B. Kimala, IC title, British Bulldog B. Mountie. September 19, Beverly, Ohio, IWA, 165, Chris Handler B. Lord Zoltan 5 stars, Rock Parsons B. Wild Thing Core, Scott Summers B. Rick Firestone, Handler B. Thing, Tommy Rich B. Summers to win IWA title, Firestone B. Chopper Davidson, Rich and Firestone and Handler B. Parsons and Summers and Davidson. September 21, Memphis, USWA, Rickhouse Brown B. The Hornet, Eric Embry B. Doug Gilbert DQ, Moondog Fifi B. Miss Texas to win USWA Women's title, Billy Travis B. Bill Dundee, Brian Christopher B. Reno Riggins to win held up Southern title, Tommy Rich and Buddy Landell B. Riggins and Dundee, replacing Moondogs, Mike Samples and Burt Prentice and Richard Lee B. Eddie Marlin and Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett, Howard Jeff Gaylord and Mr. Hughes Howard Hughes Connection, B. Lawler and Jarrett in non-title match, Junkyard Dog B. Eddie Gilbert to win USWA title 1 minute. September 21st Osaka Furitsu Gym UWFI, 7,000 sellout Takayama B. Tom Burton, Mark Silver D. Masahito Kakiara, Mark Fleming B. Yuko Miyato, Kiyoshi Tamura B. Steve Cox, Kazuo Yamazaki B. Yoji Angio, UWFI title, Nobuhiko Takada B. Gary Albright to win Luthez Belt 2025 reverse cross arm lock submission. September 21st Iweight New Japan, 3,150 sellout prelim results unavailable, Osamu Kido B. Brad Reingens, Shiro Koshinaka and Masashi Aoyagi and Kengo Kimura B. El Samurai and Kensuke Sasaki and Jushin Liger, Riki Choshu and Hiroshi Hazi and Takayuki Izuka B. Hiro Saito and Tatsutoshi Goto and Super Strong Machine, Shinya Hashimoto and Masa Saito B. Samoans, Samu and Kokina, Keiji Muto and Masa Chono and Tatsumi Fujinami B. Killer B. Brian Blair, and Scott Norton and Tony Halme. September 22nd Arena Coliseo in Mexico City, EMLL Tor Ver and Mestizo B. El Pegaso and Dick Angelo Jr., Septiembre Negro Jr. and Guerrero de la Muerte B. Kato Kung Lee Jr. and Talisman Jr., La Diabolica and Tanya and Maria del Angel B. La Sirenita and Lady Apache and Xochitl Hamada, El Brazo and Dandy and Brazo de Oro B. Sangre Chicana and Great Kabuki and Negro Casas DQ, NWALTHWT title, Apollo Dantes B. Jacques Mate. September 23rd Tonalia, Arizona, AWF, 210, Electric Youth B. Jason Peters, Samoan Prince, James Wino, B. Liberty Valance, Steve Vega, Navajo Kid, Steve Eastless, B. Rick Sadist, Doug Van Vactor, Steve Gatorwolf B. Thunder Machine, Aguiloya. September 23rd Yokohama Arena, New Japan, 17,010 sellout Osamu Nishimura B. Satoshi Kojima, Hiro Saito B. Black Cat, Tatsutoshi Goto and Super Strong Machine B. Samoans, El Samurai and Koji Kanemoto B. Jushin Liger and Hiroyoshi Yamamoto, Scott Norton B. Tony Halme, Masashi Aoyagi and Kengo Kimura and Shiro Koshinaka and Nakatoshi Saito B. Riki Choshu and Tatsumi Fujinami and Osamu Kido and Takayuki Izuka, WGP and Greatest 18 Club title, Great Muta B. Shinya Hashimoto, a WGP Tag title, Rick and Scott Steiner B. Hiroshi Hazi and Kensuke Sasaki, NWA title, Masachono B. Steve Austin. September 23rd Colorado Springs, CCW, Billy Mack B. Mike Matisani, Lou Perez B. Cuban Assassin, Pat Tanaka and Dean Malenko B. State Patrol, Al Perez B. Kevin Sullivan, Eric Embry B. Abdullah the Butcher. September 24th Tampa ICWA, Mickey J. B. Kenny Kendall Core, Coconut Savage B. Bull Payne, Kevin Sullivan B. Stormtrooper DQ, Jimmy Backlund D. DQ Top Gun, David Sierra, Backlund B. Mark Star DQ. Star retains Iqua LTHWT title. September 24th Stuttgart, Germany WWF, IRS B. Virgil Legion of Doom Animal and Crush B. Beverly Brothers, Randy Savage B. Ted DiBiase, WWF Tag Title, Natural Disasters B. Skinner and Papa Shango, Bret Hart B. Rick Martel, Bushwhackers B. Genius and Kato, WWF Title, Ric Flair B. Tito Santana. September 24th Amura, Wings, 2135 Winger, Takashi Okano B. Ryo Miyake, Gypsy Joe D. Yukihiro Kanemura, Iceman Ricky Santana B. Masaru Toy, Yukihiro Kanemura B. Headhunter B. Headhunter B. Jason the Terrible, Roberto Rodriguez, Tornado Match, Miguelito Perez and Kim Duke B. Mr. Pogo and Terminator. September 24th Miyagi, All Japan Women 1600, prelim results unavailable, Bull Nakano and Tomoko Watanabe B. Marco Yoshida and Toshio Yamada, Asia Kong and Miori Kamiya and Saki Hasegawa B. Mima Shimoda and Atsuko Mita and Akira Hokuto. September 24th Tokyo Korakuen Hall LLPW 1300, Eagle Sawai B. Miki Handa, Harley Saito B. Mami Kitamura, Rumi Kazama B. Hoski, Shinobu Kandori and Saito B. Norio Tatano and Futagami B. Kandori and Saito. September 25th Dortmund, Germany WWF, Bushwhackers B. Skinner and Kato, Rick Martel B. Tito Santana, Legion of Doom Animal and Crush B. Beverly Brothers, WWF title, Ric Flair B. Randy Savage, Virgil B. Genius, Bret Hart B. Papa Shango, WWF Tag title, Natural Disasters B. Money Incorporated. September 25th Humacao PR, WWC Equalizer B. Richie Santiago, Exotico B. Rockin' Rebel, Cyclone Salvadorino, and Lale B. Joe Don Smith and Muhammad Hussein, Lou Fabiano, Rex King B. Solid Gold 14 karat, Victor Jovica B. L. Vigilante DQ, Ray Gonzalez B. Solid Gold 24 karat, Dick Murdoch B. L. Bronco No. 1, Invader No. 1 B. Iron Sheep DQ. September 25th Kumamoto Wings, 2,863 sellout. Gypsy Joe B. Winger, Iceman B. Headhunter B. Miguelito Perez B. Masaru Toy Terminator B. Yukihiro Kanemura, Bunkhouse Barbed Wire Baseball Bat Deathmatch, Jason the Terrible and Mr. Pogo B. Headhunter A. and Kim Duke. September 25th Dallas Sportatorium GWF, 1,925/ less than 100 paid, Michael Worthington Davis 3B Nick Golden, Mike Lane B. Calvin Knapp, Ebony Experience B. Dusty Wolf and Alex Porto, Lane B. Larry Green, Wolf B. Manny Villalobos, Stevie Ray B. Davis DQ, Davis retains GWF TV title, Killer Tim Brooks B. Golden, Cry Baby Buxton B. Green, Rod Price B. John Bishop to retain North American title, Porto DDQ Mike Dahl, Porto retains GWF LTHWT title, Ebony Experience DDQ Black Bart and Johnny Mantel, Ebony Experience retains GWF tag titles. September 25th Arena Mexico in Mexico City Cmll Oro and Plata B. Felino and Fierro 3 stars, Lazartron Hector Guerrero and Mascara Magica Eddie Guerrero, and Blue Demon Jr. B. Bestia Salvaje and La Fiera and Emilio Charles Jr. 3 stars, Satanico and Great Kabuki and Supremo IB Mono Negron and Atlantis and Dandy 2 stars, King Haku and Pierroth Jr. and Ultimo Dragon B. Pirata Morgan and Negro Casas and Black Magic 3 and 1/2 stars. September 25th Shimizu, All Japan Women, 1,500, Suzuka Minami and Yumiko Harabi Atsuko Mita and Mima Shimoda, Debbie Malenko B. Miori Kamiya, Akira Hokuto B. Koro Ito, Asia Kong and Saki Hasegawa B. Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue, Mariko Yoshida and Toshio Yamada B. Bull Nakano and Bat Yoshinaga. September 25th Rocky Mount, North Carolina Wow, Chaz Rocco B. Mike Star, Bambi B. Peggy Lee Leather, Rob Van Dam B. Helmet Hessler, Van Dam 1 Battle Royal. September 25th St. Petersburg WCW 1,100, Shane Douglas and Eric Watts B. Vinny Vegas and Diamond Dallas Page 1 star, Van Hammer B. Super Invader 1/4 of 1 star, Greg Valentine and Dick Slater B. Tom Zank and Marcus Bagwell 2 stars, Brian Pillman B. Brad Armstrong 2 3/4 stars, Barry Windham B. Barbarian DQ 2 stars, Dustin Rhodes and Rick Steamboat B. Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton, Rhodes pinned Eaton, 3 3/4 stars, Ron Simmons and Nikita Koloff B. Cactus Jack, and Jake Roberts Dud. September 25th Juana Diaz PR, AWF, 450 Invader No. 4, Maelo Huertas, Vigalan Mendoza, Dr. Terror B. The Rocker, TNT Juan Rivera, V. Lestat the Vampire, David Heath, DQ, Tom Brandy DDQ Hurricane Castillo Jr., Neil Superior B. The Equalizer, Bill Dan and User, Bad Boys B. Jose Luis Rivera and Vito Cruz. September 26th Tampa, WWF, 2,600, Jerry Sags B. Repo Man, Owen Hart and Coco were B. Double Trouble, Razor Ramon B. Jim Duggan, IC title British Bulldog B. Shawn Michaels DQ, Tatanka B. The Mountie, Big Boss Man B. Nels DQ, Ultimate Warrior B. Kimala. September 26th Gunma, All Japan Women, Bat Yoshinaga B. Tomoko Watanabe, Debbie Malenko and Saki Hasegawa B. Mimi Numata and Mariko Yoshida, Akira Hokuto and Atsuko Mita B. Toshio Yamada and Takako Inoue, Kyoko Inoue B. Mima Shimoda, Bull Nakano and Suzuka Minami and Yumiko Harabi Asia Kong and Miori Kamiya and Kwaro Ito. September 26th Menetai AWF 900 Dr. Terra D. The Rocker, Jose Luis Rivera B. Galan Mendoza, Lestat the Vampire B. Invader No. 4, TNT Kerr Hurricane Castillo Jr., Brett Blair B. Vito Cruz, Tom Brandy B. Equalizer, Neil Superior B. Chicky Star. September 26th Clementon, New Jersey WWA 300, Chris Evans B. Ed the Razor, Gus the Greek Terror B. Lord of Darkness Pain, Bobby Sims B. the Pharaoh in First Blood Match, Chris Candido B. Scotty Flamingo DQ 3 stars, Joe Daniels B. Spider in Amy Lee's Hair vs. Spider's Hair and Mask, Spider revealed as Glenn Ruth. September 26th Rocky Mount, North Carolina Wow, Chaz Rocco B. Colt Steel, Bambi B. Lady X, Rob Van Dam and Bambi B. Steel and X. September 26th Como PR, WWC Equalizer B. Rockin' Rebel, El Exotico B. Cyclone Salvadorino, Victor Jovica and La Lay B. Joe Don Smith and El Vigilante, El Bronco No. 1 B. Muhammad Hussein, Street Fight, Ray Gonzalez and Rex King DDQ Solid Gold, Caribbean Title, Miguelito Perez DDQ Iron Sheik, Barbed Wire Match, Invader No. 1 B. Dick Murdoch. September 26th Hamburg, Germany, WWF, Bushwhackers B. Skinner and Kato 1 star, Rick Martel B. Tito Santana 2.5 stars, WWF Tag Title, Natural Disasters B. Money Incorporated Dud, WWF Title, Ric Flair B. Randy Savage 3 3/4 stars, Legion of Doom Animal and Crush B. Beverly Brothers 2 stars, Virgil B. Genius 1 1/4 stars, Bret Hart B. Papa Shango 3 1/4 stars. September 27th Tokyo Korakuen Hall Wings, 1,500, prelim results unavailable, Miguelito Perez b Yukihiro Kanimura, Wings Tag Title, Headhunters b Jason the Terrible and Iceman, Explosive Street Fight, Kim Duke b Mr. Pogo. September 27, Charleston, South Carolina, WCW, 1,476/solid percentage paper, Eric Watts and Marcus Bagwell and Van Hammer b Diamond Dallas Page and Vinny Vegas and Bobby Eaton, Tom Zenk b Greg Valentine, Dustin Rhodes b Dick Slater, Brian Pillman b Brad Armstrong, WCW TV title, Rick Steamboat b Steve Austin, Barry Windham b Barbarian DQ, Scott Steiner b Arnold Anderson, Ron Simmons and Nikita Koloff b Cactus Jack and Jake Roberts. September 27, Kiel, Germany, WWF, Tito Santana b Genius 1 1/2 star, Legion of Doom Animal and Crush b Skinner and Kato 2 stars, Randy Savage b Papa Shango 2 3/4 stars, Money Incorporated b Bushwhackers 1 3/4 stars, Rick Martel b Virgil 3 stars, WWF Tag Title, Natural Disasters b Beverly Brothers Dud, WWF Title, Ric Flair b Bret Hart 35-13 4.5 stars. September 27, Arena Mexico in Mexico City, Nhl Guerrero Samurai 2 and Gran Apache IB Reyes Velox I, and Escudero Rojo Septiembre Negro Jr. and Guerrero de la Muerte VL Filoso and Metallico, Felino and Fierro and Lynx DL Jalisco and Ciclone Ramirez, and Aguila Solitaria, Mano Negra and King Haku and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. BL Hijo del Solitario and MS1 and Emilio Charles Jr., Parada Morgan B. Pierre Roth Jr. September 27, El Torreo in Naucalpan, UWA, Rudy Reyna and May Flowers and Ping Pinela Escarlata de El Rudo and Los Espantos 4 and 5, El Signo and Inegro Navarro and Black Power 2 B Crazy Star I and Cajos I and Babyface I, Dos Caras and Villano 3 and Enrique Viera B the Killer and Dr. Wagner Jr. and Loco Zando Khan, Scorpio Sr. and Jr. and Shuel Guerrero B Black Scorpio and Villano V and El Baron, UWA HWT title, Connect BPN News. September 27, Los Angeles, Jalisco Promotions, 200, Greg Regalado B Fisico Nuclear, Cara Marcado and El Indio B Zeppelin and Somba de Plata Jr., Torito Jr. and Intercontinental and Nueva Image B Torito and Los Verdugos, Piloto Suicida and Mercurio and Jalisco IDDQ Loverboy and Cesar Sando Jr. and Remington 4 stars. September 27, Dallas, Big D, 242, Ray Evans B Jimmy James, Big D B Texas Doll, Ricky Long, Gary Young B Eric Fontaine to win Big D HWT title, Terry Sims B Scott Braddock, Eric Embry B Randy Rhodes. Special thanks to Dr. Stephen H. Sims, Michael Fox, Dan Paris, Paul Spiegel, Ron Lemieux, Andy Stowell, Larry Weaver, Oliver Kopp, Ronald Dagenald, Freddie Fargo, Kurt Brown. AAA. This coming weekend's television show was taped on September 25 in Querétaro. Don't have any details at press time with Lismark Sr. and Pero Aguayo and El Hijo del Santo vs. Fishman and Espanto Jr. and Mascara Año 2000. Lismark Jr. and Tinieblas Jr. and Super Astro vs. Jerry Estrada and Ice Killer and Angel Blanco Jr. Tony Arce and Vulcano and Rocco Valente vs. Misterioso and Volador and Rey Mysterio Jr. and Heavy Metal. Canelo Casas and Psicosis and Picudo vs. Winners and Super Colo and Mr. Magneto, so it has some potential on paper. The SNL Union of EMLL and UWA wrestlers called a strike on 2 p.m. this past Friday against the 3 small arenas in Mexico City that Raul Reyes promotes AAA wrestling in. They seem to be building toward a Blue Panther title defense of the Mexican middleweight strap against Super Astro, since on television this past weekend Astro scored a clean pin on Panther in the third fall of a 6-man match and then issued a challenge for a title match. EMLL. The CMLL World Heavyweight Title Tournament will take place over 3 Friday nights, October 23rd, October 30th and the finals being on November 6th, all at Arena Mexico. They'll hold 8-man tournaments on the first 2 Fridays and the 2 winners then meet on November 6th. Entered are Canadian Vampire Casanova, Black Magic, Rayo de Jalisco Jr., Sultan Gargoyle Mississippi 1, King Haku, Brazo de Plata, Massacre Parada Morgan, Gran Marcus Jr., Troglodyna, Popotecas and El Egipcio plus 3 more to be announced. The title has been vacant since champ Cien Caras jumped to AAA. Felino had a CMLL welterweight title defense against Oro on September 27 in Naucalpan, which was set up by Oro pinning Felino in the third fall of a tag match on television that was taped September 25. CMLL light heavyweight champ Pierre Roth Jr. lost a non-title Battle of Heels match on September 27 at Arena Mexico to Morgan in 2 straight falls via submission to set up a title match on October 4 in the same building. Even though both are heels, their respective trios, the Infernales and Untouchables, have been feuding for months. Pierre Roth may be turning face, however, As in the main event on September 25 at Arena Mexico, it was scheduled as Haku and Vampire and Ultimo Dragon vs. Morgan and Negro Casas and Magic. Before the match, Magic jumped Vampire and pile-drove him on the floor and he was stretchered out. Instead of going 2-on-3, Hierroth ran out and joined Haku and Dragon, but he was heavily juiced and submitted in the first fall before Haku used power bombs to win the second and third fall. Apparently the turn is being done because there is a movie that starts filming this week which builds up to a 6-man tag match with Los Guerreros del Futuro as the heel team and the face team being Vampire, who is by far the most over wrestler in the promotion, and Hierroth, who have been rivals in the ring, and a third person. The office had a meeting with the wrestlers on September 1st saying that they are now official partners with UWA, and that both groups would be running shows together. Although there is little evidence of anything more than the usual occasional talent exchanges of the past thus far. The traditional Friday night Arena Mexico shows, which had been drawing in excess of 10,000 fans per week, are down around the 7,000 mark. Hector Guerrero debuted on September 25 at Arena Mexico under a hood as Lazartron, the same name he used in the NWA several years back, and teamed with Mascara Magica, Brother Eddie, and Blue Demon Jr. to beat Bestia Salvaje and La Fiera and Emilio Charles Jr. Apollo Dantes retained the NWA Light Heavyweight title, beating Jacques Mate on September 22 at Arena Coliseo. A television station in Guadalajara, which is available in satellite in the US but I've got no idea who to pick it up, is going to start on October 7 running a 1-hour weekly show filled with tapes of famous matches with the original El Santo, Gory Guerrero, Blue Demon, etc. from the 40s and 50s. UWA. Connect retained his UWA World Heavyweight title on September 27 at El Toreo, winning 2 out of 3 falls from PN News, which should shock everyone. Actually, in the second fall, News won the fall with a dropkick off the top rope, which is something for a 400-pound man. Connect won the third fall with a senton, backward splash. In the only other main item on the show, they started a feud between Scorpio Sr. and Black Scorpio, Charles Skaggs from Colorado. Rafael Fresero and wrestlers Transformer Ray Zana and Ryo Tapatio were injured on Saturday in a bus robbery in Guanajuato, although Transformer, I believe, is already back in action. New Japan. The next major show will be October 18 in Chiba at the 7,500-seat building, but tickets will be $160 down to $24 with Great Muta vs. Scott Norton for the IWGP title, Tatsumi Fujinami and Big Van Vader vs. Hiroshi Hashi and Kensuke Sasaki, Riki Choshu vs. Tony Halme, Masa Chono and Takayuki Iizuka and Shinya Hashimoto vs. Kengo Kimura, and Akitoshi Saito and Shiro Koshinaka, Jushin Liger and Koji Kanemoto vs. Pegasus Kid and Norio Onaga, and El Samurai defends the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title against a mystery opponent. Muto returned the Greatest 18 Club World Martial Arts Championship to the New Japan office after retaining the title on the September 23 show. Muto said he wanted to concentrate on defending the more prestigious IWGP title. There was actually talk in a press conference and in Tokyo Sports of an Antonio Inoki vs. George Foreman match for the January 4 Tokyo Dome show, but in reality that is close to an impossibility. Tokyo Dome tickets go on sale on October 10 with tickets at $240, $160, $80, $40 and $24. The hottest next program seems to be War vs. New Japan, although New Japan only wants to use Tatsumi Kitahara, Masao Orihara and Tenryu as part of the angle. This angle gives New Japan a new storyline and is basically the savior for War, which is headed for financial problems with the current money runs out. There seems to be no interest in Yoshihiro Asai, who went to the New Japan training camp many years ago and quit, then moved to Mexico. Tag tournament opening night is October 8 in Yokosuka with Fujinami and Vader vs. Bigelow and Muto and Machine and Norton vs. Neidhart and Zenk. No major arenas during the tour except for the Big Chiba show and the finals on October 21 at the Hamamatsu Arena, 7,500 seats, with Choshu and Hashimoto vs. Vader and Fujinami and Muto and Bigelow vs. Hashi and Sasaki in the finals, which no doubt will involve 2 of those 4 teams. Nothing official new on the Hogan front. No deal has been cut, but supposedly they've agreed to everything except merchandising percentage for Hogan to debut at the January 4 Dome show. Hogan apparently about 8 weeks ago suffered a pretty serious neck injury, similar to the one Paul Orndorff had, which is one of the reasons why he's lost so much muscle size and tone since he can't work out. Hogan also has a charity gig for Hurricane Andrew victims coming up in Miami in a deal sponsored by Gloria Estefan of Miami's Sound Machine. Antonio Inoki got some mainstream U.S. media publicity since the Japanese sent a military unit as part of the peacekeeping forces to Cambodia last week, and politician Mr. Inoki was part of the Japanese crew that landed. New Japan booker Joe Daigo met recently with Sid Audi, although no talk at all about him coming in. Other Japan notes. All Japan is holding its 20th anniversary party this coming Wednesday before starting the next tour. Nobuhiko Takada won the UWFI World's Heavyweight title on the September 21 Osaka card, beating Gary Albright via submission with a reverse cross-arm lock in 2025. Much of the publicity surrounding this match came from the fact that Lou Thesz, Danny Hodge and Billy Robinson were brought in as judges in case it went the time limit. Takada won Thesz' old NWA World title belt, which was put up as the prize. The next UWFI show will be October 23 at Tokyo Budokan Hall, just 2 days after All Japan runs the same building for the Misawa vs. Kawada match, headlined by Takada vs. Koji Kyo in a non-title match. The gimmick is that Kyo isn't a pro wrestler, so he's not interested in the title. UWFI has had some discussions about debuting in the US with a live show in Billings, Montana, which is Albright's original hometown, although that is far from definite. For those keeping track of titles, here's the situation with the FMWWWA World Martial Arts title. The Sheik won the title from Onita a few months back. When Sheik was hospitalized, he gave the title belt to Tiger Jeet Singh, which is how Onita won the title from Singh on the September 19 Yokohama Stadium show. While no announcement has been made because of War's financial situation, it's expected that they'll be bringing in no more major WWF names after the October tour when Owen Hart and Koko were scheduled. With the Takano brothers having quit now, which is headed by Kazuo Sakurada, Kendo Nagasaki as president, will be pushing Shinriki as its top star, which shows just how weak the group really is. Don't be surprised to see Now and Wings join forces in 1993. According to the interview the Takano brothers gave in a non-wrestling magazine, the folding of SWS and War/Now talent split was all stemming from Hachiro Tanaka wanting to get out of the wrestling business, and that he used Yoshiaki Yatsu as the fall guy. The Takano said that since Tanaka had lost so much money with the SWS, he wanted to get out of wrestling but needed to create a story to save face while doing so. They claimed Tanaka met with Yatsu, who plotted with those opposed to Tenryu, mainly the ex-All Japan wrestlers in the group consisting of the Takano brothers, Naoki Sano and the current Now wrestlers. Yatsu took all the heat from the marks for the split-up of the groups and the folding of SWS, then retired from wrestling. Yatsu has since filed suit against Tanaka since he had signed a 5-year contract. Tanaka gave War $960,000 for startup costs and 1-year operational costs and gave Now $320,000. According to the Takanos, the wrestlers who signed Now contacts all had it stipulated that they can never say anything bad publicly about either Tanaka or Megon Super Opticals, Tanaka's company. Wings drew a full house on September 25 in Kumamoto of 2,863 for a bunkhouse barbed wire baseball bat death match with Jason the Terrible and Mr. Pogo beating Headhunter A and Kim Duke. Gypsy Joe, who lost a loser must retire match with Pogo last week, worked every night on this tour in what was billed as 5-minute exhibition matches. Wings tour ended on September 27 at Korakuen Hall before a non-sellout 1,500 for Duke beating Pogo in an explosive match with heavy double juice. The only other Korakuen show of the past week was the second LLPW card, which drew about 1,300 on September 24. They did an interesting gimmick in the main event, which was Harley Saito and Shinobu Kandori versus Norio Tatano and Futagami. Kandori caught Tatano in a chicken wing and the refs stopped the match at 10:38, but Tatano claimed she had never submitted. They ruled that was the case and had an immediate rematch with Tatano's team winning after 15 more minutes. USWA. A couple of title changes on the September 21 show in Memphis as Junkyard Dog won the USWA title beating Eddie Gilbert with a Russian leg sweep in 1 minute, while Brian Christopher regained the Southern title beating Reno B. Bad Riggins. No Mid-South Coliseum show this week because the fair is in town, but they're having a few wrestling matches each night at the fair. Moondog Cujo, Lanny Keene, is out of action with a slip disc and won't be back for a long time. Moondog Spot Larry Booker is still around but seemingly won't be getting much of a push. The Blackhearts, Tom Nash and David Johnson, made an impressive television debut on Saturday against the Rock and Roll Express, ending when Burt Prentice interfered for the DQ. Prentice is managing Blackhearts. Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Lawler lost a non-title match on September 21 to the Howard Hughes Connection, Mr. Hughes and Jeff Gaylord, who I guess is Howard, when there were 2 ref bumps before Prentice came out as the third ref and wouldn't count as the faces had the heels pinned. Richard Lee then came out and tripped Jarrett as he went to suplex one of the heels, and Lee held his leg as Prentice counted to 3. Jimmy Hart, who is said to be their manager, wasn't at the Coliseum with the story that he was out forever after Eddie Gilbert lost a loser leaves town match for Hart against Lawler back about 6 years ago. Hart did a taped interview and even though he was live last week, said he was banned from television. The Hughes connection then destroyed jobbers TD Steele and Trey Keller before Keller was injured and Jarrett came out to replace him. Jarrett got the offense on both before they double-teamed him and Lawler made the save. Lawler then called the connection the Tank Brothers, Sherman and Septic, a line made famous in these parts 16 years ago when Tojo Yamamoto and Jerry Jarrett were feuding with Phil Hickerson and Al Green and used on a regular basis since then. Also new to the area are the Dream Warriors, Screamer and Brew, two more Road Warrior clones, real names Dave and Dennis Kissolinik, with manager Ronnie Lotz, who was said to have been really good on his first interview. Junkyard Dog did an interview saying that years ago in Mid-South the Blackhearts beat up injured one of his friends and that he had never gotten a chance to get back at them for it, but that when he found out the Blackhearts were in, he called his best tag partner from the Mid-South days for a match in a few weeks against them. The partner? Jim Duggan. Memphis continues to get only the best of the WWF wrestlers. I figure David Johnson of the Blackhearts must have been at most 12 or 13 years old when JYD bolted Mid-South for WWF, and Nash couldn't have been much older. Dog had a TV match against Billy Travis ending when Blackhearts, Doug Gilbert and Christopher all jumped him and Blackhearts kept coming off the top on JYD, while Prentice was laughing until Lawler and Riggins made the save. Mike Miller has returned from Japan. The major angle involving Mike Samples and Eddie Marlin saw last week's six-man tag with Marlin putting up 10% of the USWA against Samples' 10% in a six-man with Samples and Lee and Prentice versus Marlin and Jarrett, and Lawler ended with Marlin beating on Samples, but while the ref wasn't looking, Eddie Gilbert ran in the ring and hit Marlin with a chain and put Samples on top for the pin, so Samples now has 20%. Marlin on an interview said it was the first time in 40 years in wrestling that he lost a match to a guy who never placed a hand on him. Later in the show, after the Blackhearts rock and roll match which ended when ref Kevin Lawler, DQ'd Blackhearts, Prentice complained to Samples and said they should fine the ref $5,000 and fire him, and Samples said he'd do anything Prentice wanted and did just that. Rock and roll will probably be around only another week or two. SMW. No house shows this past week. On Saturday's television, Ron Wright said that he wasn't going to allow Dirty White Boy to give Tim Horner any SMW title shots even though Horner beat him in the non-title match that aired the previous week. Horner said it was in the contract that if he won a non-title match he'd get a title match, but Wright claimed he had arthritis and couldn't even sign the contract. While this was going on, White Boy destroyed Horner with a chair and hung him over the rope. Horner had bloody coming out of his mouth. Commissioner Bob Armstrong was so mad that he told White Boy that he was giving Horner as many title shots as he wanted. Armstrong also noted that they had identified the mystery wrestler who had been attacking Brian Lee as the Mongolian Mauler, but they had yet to identify the second man, Night Stalker, even though he had the initials NS on his tights. Robert Fuller did an interview for upcoming matches with the Rock and Roll Express, claiming that they were like Guns N' Roses, nothing but drug addicts, and he was like Elvis Presley, who wouldn't touch any of that stuff. Early October house show lineups go something like this: White Boy vs. Horner for SMW title, Lee vs. Mongolian Mauler, Heavenly Bodies vs. Rock and Roll Express for SMW tag title, and Fuller and Jimmy Golden vs. Bobby and Genevieve Fulton. Texas. Global lost its local Dallas television effective this past Saturday. A tape was made for Saturday night airing on CH27, however the station, which was planning on dumping GWF for paid commercial programming starting next week, told GWF they were pulling the plug on the show 1 week early. Under normal circumstances, this would be a disaster, but with fewer than 100 fans paying each week to attend, it probably won't make much difference. This week's Global Wrestling script saw Joe Castellini, who had played the heel commissioner role, dumped and replaced by Secretary Commissioner Randolph. During the card, as they were going to play the national anthem, Skander Akbar came out with Black Bart and Manny Fernandez and stopped and gave Bart a tape of what he said was the Iraqi national anthem. While it was playing, Randolph jumped in the ring and showed a piece of paper to Bart, who then ran back to the sound room and turned the tape off. Akbar and Bart started arguing about it, and Bart told Akbar to read the paper, which said that Castellini had been indicted by a grand jury on charges of racketeering, embezzlement and gambling. With all of wrestling's image problems, it's really incredibly smart when it comes to timing to do a work that makes things seem only worse than they really are. Randolph then fined Akbar $10,000 and said if he didn't pay it by next Friday, he'd be out of the GWF, and suspended Fernandez, who is headed to Japan for now. Later in the show, Akbar and his lawyer, Gaston B. Means, came out to talk with Manny Villalobos, who the storyline has it just got approval for a HUD house he's been working on getting for months. Akbar produced the note for the house saying he bought it up, and noted the note contained an escalation clause, and Akbar said he's upping Villalobos' monthly payment from $380 to $790. Villalobos said he couldn't afford that payment, so Akbar told them he was evicting them immediately. Rod Price used a new foreign object of the week, a golf ball to the Heat, to keep the North American title, beating John Bishop. Jack Victory, Steve Cox and Steve Simpson all no-showed on Friday. Cox is hilarious, since it's the 7th week in a row. They announced Cox wasn't there even though he had made it to the building but received an emergency phone call to rush home, but in reality he wasn't there at all. He's being announced for October 2nd as well, which has Villalobos vs. Crybaby Buxton, Victory vs. Dusty Wolf, Stevie Ray vs. Killer Tim Brooks, Cox vs. Price, Booker T vs. Mike Davis, Simpson vs. John Tatum and Tribal Nation, Youngbloods vs. Bart and Johnny Mantell. Al Perez was also advertised as returning. Patriot Del Wilkes is supposed to be flown in on October 23rd. Big D show on September 27th was scheduled to be Tommy Rich vs. Eric Embry on top. Rich called the morning of the show and said he needed $400 wired for his airfare, so Randy Rhoads replaced him. Freddie Fargo did a bit where he said he fired Rich and canceled his plane ticket and brought in Rhoads from Puerto Rico, where he legit had been working, to eliminate Embry. Embry juiced a bucket but got the pin. After the match, Rhoads and Fargo held Embry down, while Gary Young smashed his arm with a chair, breaking it. An 80-ish grandmother decked Fargo, who sold it big time, as he was leaving the ring. Next week's show is Big D's one-year anniversary card with a 22-man battle royal with Chris Adams, Bill Irwin, Danny Davis, Bill Dundee, Tatum and others being brought in. Jeff Jarrett and Black Hearts are also due on shortly. Here and there. The sentencing for Kerry Von Erich on the forging drug prescription charges, scheduled for Monday, somehow didn't take place during court session on that day. No other details are available at press time. Invader number 1 Jose Gonzalez turned babyface 2 weeks back in Puerto Rico, saving Carlitos Colon from an attack by Dick Murdoch and Abdullah the Butcher, and is now feuding with those two and also Iron Sheik. Sometime wrestler Kendall Windham is now running a video dating service. Eddie Mansfield's IWF just postponed its next scheduled television taping. Terry Funk said on John Arezzi's radio show over the weekend that he's now taking independent dates and talked about wanting to wrestle Masa Chono for the NWA title. Luna Vachon is out of the AWF in Puerto Rico with a story that she was suspended for throwing fire. Leah Maivia is scheduling a major show in Honolulu on December 15th as the Peter Maivia Memorial Show. Alex Merves has announced he's folding the newsletter 3 Count and will be mailing all refunds in early December. Torberg was in Japan this past week trying to sell videotapes and shows for television. Mickey Doyle is scheduled for early October surgery to remove bone spurs from his neck and will be back early next year. Barry Hardy is undergoing surgery for a ruptured disc and is expected out until January. Ron Cumberledge is out with a torn bicep. Tommy Rich won the IWA title from Scott Summers on September 19th in Beverly, Ohio. WWWOW has shows October 3rd in Orangeburg, South Carolina, Wahoo vs. Watley plus PN News, October 7th in Greenville, North Carolina, Wahoo vs. Russian Assassin, October 8th in Royston, Georgia, Junkyard Dog vs. Night Stalker. Lucha Libre at All Nations Center in Los Angeles on September 27th had a 4-stars main event with Pilato Suicida and Mercurio and Jalisco IDDQ Loverboy and Cesar Sando Jr. and Remington in a match where everyone plus ref Sergio Garcia juiced. Rematch this coming Sunday night. Congrats to Readers Dave and Bonnie Katz for the birth of first son Robert on September 8th. Emilio Olacia as the Black Scorpion married Connie Bryant in the wrestling ring as part of a card on September 19th in Gastonia, North Carolina. West Coast Championship Wrestling has shows October 7th in Ladysmith, October 8th in Qualicum Beach and October 9th in Lake Cowichan on Vancouver Island. Timothy Flowers vs. Buddy Wayne and Michelle Starr vs. Ole Olsen headline. Doug Masters is in from Puerto Rico feuding with Flowers, while Buddy Rose and Samito have also work dates for this group. Carl Moffat, Calgary Jason the Terrible, has a lawsuit against Stu Hart regarding a 1989 van accident that ended his career. The suit opens on November 2nd. Moffat is seeking $1 million in lost wages and compensation. Southern Wrestling Federation has a show October 3rd in Orlando with Jerry Gray and Bugsy McGraw on top. Spider was unmasked as Glenn Ruth and had his head shaved on September 26th in Clementon, New Jersey after losing to Joe Daniels. Steve Gator Wolf ran shows on September 21st in Dennahotso, Arizona before 185, September 22nd in Bluff, Utah before 100 and September 23rd in Tonalea, Arizona before 210 using Los Angeles-based wrestlers. WWF. Of the newcomers at the tapings, Lance Cassidy was Steve Armstrong doing a singing gimmick, while Maximilian Moon was named number 436 for Paul Diamond, who is trying to break Jack Victory's record. Samu and Fatu are now being called the Head Shrinkers and debuted on Primetime Wrestling last week. Undertaker is out of action with a broken collarbone for another week or so. Jim Duggan replaced him around the horn this past week. Lou Albano has talked with some folks about coming in, but the current holdup is that Albano doesn't want to go on the road full-time, so no deal has been cut. Rumor has it Albano's role would be as a babyface manager for the Nasty Boys, who are going to be turned under the present plan. Undertaker vs. Cmll at Survivor Series will be a match where the winner has to stuff the loser in a casket. They aired footage of Bob Backlund's matches from a decade ago against Pat Patterson and Billy Graham of all people this past Sunday on All-American Wrestling. The Hoosier Herpetological Society conducted a letter-writing campaign trying to keep Jake Roberts from using reptiles as part of his act. It was noted that in Baton Rouge, the local animal control board said Roberts' act involved cruelty to animals and wouldn't let him use the snakes as part of his performance. Anyway, the funny part of all this is that with the pressure, Titan just announced that Jake would no longer be allowed to bring snakes to his matches. In an interview in the Winnipeg Sun on September 19, Steve Planamenta, when asked if wrestling matches were scripted, said, "We call them storylines. We make no bones about it. This isn't 1950 where the wrestling promoters are going to tell you that the guys are out there to kill each other. They're out there to entertain the fans." Final comment, a lot of people say, "I think I know what's going to happen in the end." That's okay. Every year the Wizard of Oz is on and Dorothy ends up back in Kansas. But people still watch it. Ric Flair and Bret Hart had what was reported as a 4.5 stars title match on September 27 in Kiel, Germany, which went 35-13. October 1st at the Meadowlands is headlined by Warrior and Bossman and Undertaker, or Duggan, versus Nails and Kimala and Razor Ramon. WCW. Expect a steady stream of new angles on television on a weekly basis a la Dusty Rhodes' 1988 booking, with people turning so fast that only the hardcores can keep up with it. I expect at least a few new twists and turns at television. Taped on Tuesday night in Columbus, Georgia. One of the matches that'll take place on that taping has Steamboat defending the TV title against Scott Steiner. While running all these angles makes for entertaining television, doing too much too fast confuses most casual viewers, and we already saw the result of what happened in 1988 in NWA and late 1986 in Mid-South, when a promotion continually throws angle upon angle out there hoping that something gets hot, when doing so much pretty much guarantees nothing is going to get hot because it all starts looking the same. Of course, the company is in a tough position because reversing a trend of declining TV ratings is the hardest task of all. If people watch TV, you can at least get them to the arenas by building toward a program that in some way excites or intrigues them. But if they aren't watching television, it doesn't matter what you put on television, those who aren't watching aren't going to get hooked into coming to the arenas. Richard Slinger received a tryout at the September 21st center stage taping and looked pretty good from what I was told. Missy Hyatt had a brief sound bite on a current affair this past Friday night along with Jason Hervey talking about Madonna, who you never guess it, but is Hyatt's idol. Cactus Jack was back in the ring starting September 25th for main event tag matches, teaming with Jake Roberts against Ron Simmons and Nikita Koloff in St. Petersburg, Jacksonville and Charleston, South Carolina. I believe Jack was pretty much ordered back in the ring due to a depleted heel side, even though he was nowhere near physically ready to perform because of his badly torn groin muscle, and was supposed to stay out of the ring until mid-October. Saturday's TBS television show was the best show in a while with all the pressure on after the bad ratings. Although I didn't think Bruno Sammartino added much on color, he did an empty arena interview with Tony Schiavone that was one of the best babyface promos I've seen in a long time. I sensed that they were building to Sammartino being in Ron Simmons' corner at Halloween Havoc, since Cactus Jack would be in Barbarian's corner. If they aren't building toward that direction, they should, since Sammartino would be far more valuable in that type of situation than in his currently announced role as simply co-host of the show with Schiavone. Ross and Ventura will handle the fall by fall. In the Simmons and Wyndham vs. Barbarian and Roberts tag match, note how it appeared Wyndham actually threw Simmons into Barbarian's boot at the finish. By the way, was Barbarian loading his boot before he kicked Simmons? If he wasn't, he shouldn't have been acting like he was. And if he was, then the announcers should have emphasized it a whole lot more, since I don't think any fans that haven't seen the loaded boot gimmick, which hasn't been done on a national basis in years, have a clue as to what the gimmick is all about. They also did a nice video piece on Kensuke Sasaki coming in, and Bobby Eaton vs. Brad Armstrong was a really good match. In addition, they did about as good a job as can be done in putting heat on Simmons vs. Barbarian for Havoc, although my feeling is it's simply impossible for fans to take Barbarian as a legit world title contender no matter how well the storyline is put together. While this isn't official, I'm pretty sure you can add a Rick Steamboat vs. Steve Austin TV title match to the Havoc lineup. On the other hand, the Van Hammer video was what the fast-forward button on the VCR was specifically designed for. Ryan Pillman needs a lot more coaching on talking as a heel before they send him out to do extended color commentary during a match. And what happened to Michael Hayes managing Eaton? Not only was Hayes not there for that match, but his name was never even mentioned. Talk about angles being started and ended in record time with little in the way of storylines to explain anything. Jim Ross hinted on the hotline that Paul E. Dangerously would be brought back to manage Pillman and Austin as a tag team, although they just split Austin and Dangerously up and seemingly are pushing Austin in the direction of being a Ric Flair clone. Big mistake, because Steve Austin in no way, shape or form is Ric Flair. And Flair is still an active wrestler, so at best he'll look like a cheap copycat, and he doesn't have the Buddy Landel personality where he can get the right kind of heat for being a copycat of a successful main eventer. Morale remains at roughly the same level as it's been, with most expecting that the key performers whose contracts expire will be finding new places to work rather than stay under the new system. Tony Atlas has been talked with about coming in for the role Butch Reed was originally supposed to fill. Weekend shows saw them draw about 1,100 on September 24th in Tallahassee and the same on September 25th in St. Pete. September 26th was Jacksonville, which I heard drew well, and September 27th in Charleston, South Carolina drew 1,476, but there was liberal freebies around town. The Charleston card was said to have been pretty lousy with no intensity either in the ring or from the fans. Super Invader, Hercules, was given notice. I believe 6 wrestlers, including Sting, Rude and Simmons, were all fined $1,000 for work not up to par. More details on the new contracts. 1. Upon signing, the company owns the rights to the wrestler's ring name and likeness in perpetuity, in other words, forever. While this is hard to believe, I was told specifically there is no clause in this contract calling for residuals derived from using that name and likeness. 2. The company can give the wrestler 30 days notice to relocate. In other words, with 30 days written notice, the company has the right to get the wrestler to move. It is said this is being done to get everyone to move to Atlanta, since there are still several wrestlers living out of Charlotte. Some, like Koloff and Steamboat, have gym businesses in the area and others have homes there and are worried the situation isn't stable enough to warrant packing up everything and moving to Atlanta. There are 1 or 2 others who live in other parts of the country, as well. 3. The company has the right to book the wrestler to a third party. In other words, the company can assign the wrestler to work for another promotion anywhere in the world. 4. The top dollar figure as stipulated in the contract is $750 per night. Another $250 per night is listed as a performance incentive bonus, so only the $750 per night is guaranteed, which makes offers from outside parties look even more attractive than they may have. 5. It is specifically spelled out that in the case of injury, even life-threatening injury suffered on the job, that the wrestler is signing away legal recourse against the company in regard to lost wages or paying medical bills. The reader's pages. Jerry Gray of 6315 Jennings Road, Orlando, Florida 32818 has 2-hour videos of Southern Wrestling Federation for $13. John Zatter Jr. of 54 King Street, Nutley, New Jersey 07110 has Ric Flair tapes for trade and is looking for a tape of Flair and Hennig on Regis and Kathy Lee. Matt Creamer of 422 AW New York Avenue, Oshkosh, Wisconsin 54901 is looking for the Pogo vs. Matsunaga baseball bat barbed wire match, the Toyota Yamada hair match, and any material concerning Jello Biafra of the band Dead Kennedys. Mike McKenna of P.O. Box 1350 San Marcos, Texas 78667 is looking for Japanese videotapes, Jushin Liger dolls, new and All Japan t-shirts, and has USWA, SMW, All Japan, New Japan, EMLL and AAA for trade. Mario Peraza of 1421 N Hudson Avenue No. 3, Los Angeles, California 90028 is looking for a tape of the Madison Square Garden show with Randy Savage vs. Jim Duggan in late 1989 and for old posters of Elizabeth. Matt Lawrence of 12 Belden Road, Dover, Massachusetts 02030 puts out a bi-weekly newsletter called Straight from the Mat. Send us ace for more details. Bob Ivy of 110 Lincoln Green No. 116 Starkville, Mississippi 39759 is looking to trade USWA tapes for Smoky Mountain programs and is looking for tapes of Jim Cornette SMW interviews. He also is looking for a newsletter to write a regular column for. Frank Storm of 81 Sargent Street, Revere, Massachusetts 02151 is looking for a tape of the August 17th JWP Midnight Special. He can trade old and new All Japan Women tapes or Bruiser Brody tapes in exchange. Wrestling World Examiner has an interview with Tim Horner in upcoming issues. Price is $5 for 4 issues at P.O. Box 303, Irvington, New York 10533. Barry Rose of 200 Leslie Drive No. 717 Hallandale, Florida 33009 has old Florida programs from the 70s and 80s for sale or trade. David Manns of 1781 Craig Drive, North Huntington, Pennsylvania 15642 has observers for sale from October 86 to September 90 along with other newsletters, and is looking for newsletters from 1977-86, in particular Wrestling Wire and Mat Results. Robert Whitley Jr. of 133 N Pacific Coast Highway, Redondo Beach, California 90277 is looking for a regular supplier of Memphis tapes starting with Jimmy Hart's return and can trade for All Japan, New Japan and All Japan Women, and is also looking for an audio tape of Cactus Jack on Howard Stern. Joseph Giannotto of 472 Grammaton Avenue #1E, Mount Vernon, New York 10552 is looking for photos of Medusa and a regular supplier of Japanese tapes. Peter Morn of 136 Rockwood Avenue, St. Catharines, ONTL 2P3R8 Canada is looking for a regular supplier of Smoky Mountain tapes and has most PPVs along with movie press kits and sports cards to trade for them. Will York of 1003 Nichols Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina 27605 is looking for a regular supplier for Japanese and Mexican tapes. Clash. I gave Clash a mild thumbs up. It was funny with all their talk of the grand history of wrestling on TBS that they had to gather their film clips from the collections of wrestling fans. The history of wrestling is guarded by the fans. To the promoters, the only value of the history is the value of an erased videotape. Steamboat Austin was 3 stars, not as good as their draw on Power Hour. The show looked too much like their normal television show with it being filmed from center stage. I prefer the style they are using now, but they need the big arena, lights and the ramp. Boy, that show reminded me of how much I miss not seeing Bruno Sammartino on TBS like in the good old days. Butch Reed's return should have been saved until he could be part of a major angle with Ron Simmons. Simmons should have been sympathetic at the beginning and supportive of his former friend, and then Reed should have turned on him out of jealousy. Pillman's overacting was a waste of effort. All he had to do was throw some slight insults and one slap and the turn would have been more convincing. I'm happy with Watts and the direction of WCW. Too bad there aren't a few other strong wrestling companies, so we could see a wider variety of styles. I guess that's why we have VCRs. The most insulting wrestler in the world has to be El Cicotolico. Andre the Giant was one of the greatest draws, so I can understand why the promoters kept pushing him. But what's the deal with Cicotolico? He can't even stand up. He's making a joke out of AAA. It's too bad because I've got good memories of him from when he wrestled in Los Angeles during the early 1970s. He had good skills then and had a short-lived push, once beating Kinji Shibuya on television and teaming with his brother, Mil Mascaras. He then faded away doing jobs for many of the guys. It makes me sick to watch him now. I'll take Cmll with Negro Casas, Yoshihiro Asai and Dandy, and UWA with Kinect, Mascaras and Pegasus Kid over AAA. I only wish Conan would lose a match that forced him to wear a mask again. Steve Yohei. Alhambra, California. The September 2nd Clash provided us a look at WCW's past. All right. We went back just a few years ago when a spot would say "We Wrestle" would be immediately followed by something that was a blatant parody of the entire business. Wrestling fans may not be the brightest lights, but nobody is going to believe that two men who hated each other like Sting and Jake Roberts are supposed to would agree to appear together for hour upon hour putting together a movie scene. The whole thing was so far removed from Bill Watts' usual product and his stated goals that you have to suspect it was forced on him by corporate higher-ups. It was especially ironic to see at the finish of the 20th anniversary special, giving the obvious implication that crap like this is still the future of WCW. Peter Shandorf. Minneapolis, Minnesota. DM, the Sting Roberts movie wasn't forced on Watts by anyone. Watts has the final say in all wrestling-related matters. I really enjoyed the Clash, including the Spin the Wheel promo. It was the best produced promo work I've ever seen. The concept was fine, even within WCW's stated image. If Watts doesn't do promotion work like this, he'll be accused of living in the 70s. Gimmick matches and promotion is a part of wrestling, and I think the spin the wheel concept can get casual fans interested. Fred Stolaruk. Plymouth, Michigan. Japan trip. There's not a lot Bill Watts could have learned in just 3 days in Japan, but I'd like to think Watts may have realized how much there is to be learned. Then again, who knows? I don't think we'll ever see a Japanese-style product in this country. The people in charge here will never take the time to study and learn it. Even if they did learn it and tried to implement it, I'm not sure it would work right now. Too much damage has been done to the credibility of the sport. Re-educating the audience will work to a degree, but I'm not convinced today's audience can forget what a joke wrestling has become. It would almost need to lay low for a few years until a new audience without the preconceptions could be tapped and the old audience forgets what it saw a little. Clean finishes are definitely the key. Winners and losers are what fans want. I also believe the submissions could really help the product. The way fans went nuts for the STF and facelock really convinced me. It looks like Watts is trying to get submissions over, but for it to work, it'll take big stars giving up to the holds, not just Marcus Bagwell. Don't hold your breath. There's a lot to be said about the difference in the wrestlers in Japan and the United States. It goes a lot deeper than work rate. One of the biggest problems here is that a lot of the guys just don't care about wrestling. They wrestle because there isn't much else they can do to make that kind of money, not because they respect wrestling. How can we expect the public to respect wrestling when most of the wrestlers don't respect it? There is a difference between wrestlers who are fans at heart and wrestlers who are just looking for a paycheck. The trip really opened my eyes. It's one thing to watch Japanese videotapes, but nothing compared to being there live. For someone who grew up watching weird angles, seeing wrestling as something credible was a nice change. John Muse. Taylor, Michigan. Thanks for your Japan trip diaries. In one of the recent issues you put into perspective the switch in audience for the All Japan Women, which is my favorite promotion. On a certain level, it galls me that hardcore male wrestling fans have overrun this group. Where were they back when? I got heavily into this group in the mid-1980s through dumb luck as much as anything. A Japanese friend, knowing I liked women wrestling, sent me an hour of their television show and I was hooked, and I got fixes whenever I could, mostly from video dealers like Steve Friedlander. The Crush Gals, Mimi Hakuwara, Jumping Bomb Angels, Dumb Matsumoto and Bull Nakano was, and still is, the best stuff around. I had always noticed the audience was filled with tons of schoolgirls, but until recently I never realized there was no strong male contingent. I remember in the 80s heyday of World Class that the crowd was largely teenage girls rooting for Kerry Von Erich. All Japan wasn't presenting heartthrobs. They were giving girls idols. Remember Vince's rock and wrestling connection? All Japan Women did that a lot earlier. The girls were both wrestlers and idol singers. Only recently has this group approached the success it had in the Crush Gals days, but the raw emotion and crowd heat just doesn't come close. If this male crowd thinks the product has changed, they're sadly mistaken. Chigusa Nagao still works there. They just call her Toshio Yamada these days. The main difference between Yamada and Akira Hokuto is that Yamada does the Chigusa act better. If this audience serves as a foundation to keep the company chugging along at full steam, then it's a good thing, I guess. But I really miss the books, magazines and related merchandise I used to be able to get. Frank Storm. Revere, Massachusetts. Were every reader able to view it, the 3/8 Pogo vs Matsunaga match would have to be a mortal lock for worst match of the year. It was the worst match I've ever seen. The gimmick, a bunkhouse barbed wire baseball bat death match, is pretty twisted. Of course it was all a big tease as the contestants had to give each other love taps with the bat. For a main event, it was basically a squash match on Matsunaga. Matsunaga got just a brief moment of advantage, allowing Pogo to ginsu himself. The out-of-the-ring brawling was wooden and mechanical. In the ring, the bout was sick. Pogo worked over Matsunaga by rubbing the barbed wire bat over his clothed back. Then he ripped off his shirt and rubbed in on his bare back. The barbed wire came off the bat only to be wrapped around once first and used as barbed knucks. They should have flashed a "kids, don't try this at home" message across the ring. To cap it off, Pogo grabbed a water bottle filled with combustible liquid, which conveniently happened to be at ringside, doused Matsunaga with it and lit his head on fire. One can only hope Matsunaga was well compensated for this assault. The person who showed me the tape commented, "What can you ever do to top this? This is clearly not a match to pull out when friends ask you to explain why you like wrestling." It's hard for me to see how the NWA tournament benefited either WCW or New Japan. I think they needed to have put an American over in Japan and put a Japanese tag team over in the US if the two groups are going to have a beneficial working relationship. Talent from each company needs to get over big time in the other country. WCW could certainly use an infusion of talent, while New Japan's stable of foreign talent isn't that strong. They should have put Muto and Hazy over in the tag tourney and Wyndham over in the singles tourney. A major problem of the NWA tournament is that far too many big names weren't involved. Choshu, Vader, Simmons and Sting had to have been in the tournament to show it was an important title. I'd have had a first round of Wyndham over Bigelow, Vader over Simmons, Sting over Anderson, Choshu over Norton, Roode over Austin, Hazy over Scott Steiner, Muto over Rick Steiner and Chono over Hashimoto. Second round would have had Wyndham upset Vader, Choshu over Sting, Roode over Hazy and Muto over Chono. The semifinals would have Wyndham over Choshu and Muto over Roode. And finals have Wyndham over Muto. One would think Wyndham would become a superstar in Japan, winning 4 straight matches, and all 4 could be brought back as challengers for Wyndham when he came to Japan. Of course, in January, Wyndham would return the favor and drop the belt in the Tokyo Dome. I know Wyndham has plenty of strikes against him. He's pulled disappearing acts. He may lack desire, but he has both the size and skill to get a credible world champion in both countries. He's not like the Steiners, who are more effective in Japan when they are brought in only a few times a year, but a solid worker like Gordy or DiBiase who can work their year-round. As champion, he could work the US and work every other Japan tour. John Williams, Pasadena, California. Ex-wrestler viewpoint. I have to admit, when I was first in the business in 1985, I kind of resented that the wrestling business was exposed to the public in publications. We were always taught that this was our business and nobody else's. 8 years later, I've gone down a lot of roads and taken a lot of bumps. I never professed to be a great worker, but could get on the stick and hammer out lines, and that is how I survived. I never made any great amounts of money compared to today's wrestling stars, but I did have some good nights making money that I could never have made doing anything else, particularly through wrestling, in Mexico. I really enjoyed the time I spent doing down the road, and I made a lot of great friends in wrestling. This is more than a lot of guys can say in a business that is full of thieves, cheats, and backstabbers. Unlike a lot of other wrestlers, I realized that this life couldn't last forever. So when I was in a territory for a few months, I would try and take some courses that would help me when it hurt too much to get out of bed. I wish that some of the other boys would have done the same. I still love the wrestling business. But what has become of it? I grew up watching wrestling when it drew great houses at the Winnipeg Arena with the Crusher, Vern Gagne and Nick Bockwinkel working the place to a frenzy. Where has it all gone since then? To sports entertainment. I think Vince McMahon is a genius. He brought the business out of the closet. But I also think he screwed up. He didn't allow for all the variables that go with popularity. The steroid scene is only the tip of the iceberg. I've written many stories on steroids. I did a series on steroids in general, as well as one concerning steroids in pro wrestling in my previous newspaper here. I've also written on the same subject for Muscle Mag International and have another article that will be coming out in the next couple of months. I don't focus on the negative. I try to focus on the positive, as I personally never had any bad side effects from using roids. The point I'm trying to make is that I admire you for your efforts. We live in a changing world, and the wrestling business is no different from any other in that regard. With my job now, I'm dealing with a lot of people who have problems in life that go well beyond boys complaining about having to do drug tests. Send them down to the tent villages here in Mexico City, where some people haven't had any meat in 2 years. Pro wrestling has changed. There are now serious issues that need to be addressed, and I'm glad you offer a forum to respond to the real world of wrestling. I read your bit on my MMI column. I'd like to clear up a few things. First, as you know, when you write for a large magazine, sometimes things change from the time that you submit a story until the time it is printed. This is what happened here. I wrote the column when the steroid doctor, Mauro Di Pasquale, had just taken over the wrestling side of Titan. If I had known the story was going to sit so long, I would have updated it. Unfortunately, I have no control over that. However, when dealing with MMI, they have no say at all as to what kind of a slant that I put on my stories. Although Di Pasquale writes for them, if I thought that he was trying to feed me BS, I would have written that. The editor there has yet to touch any of my copy. When that day comes, I'll move to another magazine. Dan Denton. Mexico City, Mexico. Wrestling scandals. I must say that just when I thought I was sick about reading about all the same old wrestling scandals, you put together 3 pages that in reading, I couldn't wait to get to the next paragraph. As an insight to the Rita Chatterton story from a feminine perspective, it is not surprising to me that her story would seem to be incomplete between persons she told years ago. I guess you need to have experienced this type of thing to understand that when someone receives what they perceive as a degradation to their selfhood, they would be very reticent about revealing the entire sordid, embarrassing story to just about anyone. Of course, this makes it just that much harder to determine what is the real truth. Maybe she was embarrassed simply for what she felt was her belief she lacked the guts to have fought back hard enough. Many women don't fight back for reasons ranging from their own inability to reason how they can hurt another person, being so naive that they are at a total loss for appropriate action, to being so afraid they lose contact with the reality of the situation. Hopefully Ms. Chatterton has relearned respect for herself. Did anyone else notice on Superstars that Vince McMahon made a comment about Icopro not being steroids, just nutrition, no snake oil here? Imagine that. Even if it was part of a valid nutritional program, to advertise it as having no steroids was done in the way that he came off like a schoolyard bully bent on revenge with snot hanging out of his nose. Andy Bergioni. Des Moines, Iowa. WCW. After reading the state WCW is in, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I'm basing this solely on one of the most important issues to judge by: the wrestlers' harmony. If the wrestlers aren't happy, they'll eventually go elsewhere. With that in mind, and concluding from what I've seen and read, Bill Watts is hardly the WCW savior we thought he was. Instead, he's on the brink of destroying it. Watts needs to understand that guaranteed contracts, in every sport, is a way of life nowadays. If he thinks these guys will work on a per-day basis, when the WWF pays big bucks for long-term deals, he's crazy. That's just the politics of the business. Watts' top concern should be to provide harmony and security for the workers, creating a comfortable environment, and the result will be better performance. If you treat guys like babies, that's what you'll get. If Watts thinks he can replace Sting, Lex Luger, Steiners, Anderson, Eaton and dangerously with Valentine, Slater, Hammer, and Spivey, then he's nuts. It would be comparable to the Ace trading or selling people, like they did in the 70s, and getting old-timers in return. People are not going to pay to see Slater or Hammer. I agree with the letter writer on Steve Austin. How can you have a more bland, boring, nothing guy on top than Austin? He has no charisma. If Watts really cared what the fans want to see, regardless of work rate, he'd spend more time keeping Sting, Anderson, Eaton and the Steiners and bring in DiBiase, the Road Warriors and Flair. Also, what does everyone in the world see in Terry Taylor? The only thing he has going for him is his work, that if you ask me, that's suspect. He has maybe 2 or 3 moves. He's a lousy heel, and an even worse face. Joey Sprinkle. Orlando, Florida. DM: the WWF doesn't pay big bucks for long-term deals. They offer 2-year contracts that guarantee generally about $2,250 per year, and the rest is up to the position guys are on the card, the gate of the card, how many bookings they get, etc., because they don't guarantee money, as has generally been the case in this business. Watts feels he can compete by offering per-night deals that do guarantee how much the wrestler would be paid per appearance. If the WWF was offering big money guarantees, Watts wouldn't have the leverage to try and not renew existing deals and still have a shot at keeping the wrestler. As for Taylor, if his work is suspect, then all but a half dozen wrestlers in North America would be as well. His ability, size, charisma, age, experience and ring savvy is roughly the equivalent of Bret Hart, now the number 4 or 5 babyface in North America. The difference is Hart hasn't been as unfortunate as Taylor as far as the way those in charge directed his career. In my view, WCW's biggest problem is itself. It's their own fault they can't fill arenas for European tours. The pan-European sports network Eurosport waited for months for tapes of WCW television shows, so WCW blew its chance of having a time slot in all of Western Europe. Just look at the crowds for the WWF here. Given that WCW generally puts on better matches, with proper exposure, WCW could outdraw WWF because most European fans are more into good action, and not for the gimmicks. Oliver Kopp. Landshut, Germany. I'm very happy over the Jake Roberts angle and Ron Simmons being the new WCW champion. I feel we can say that Bill Watts is doing, not just talking, which is something we need in wrestling today. Russell Yao. Asheboro, North Carolina. Great articles on the state of WCW and Bill Watts. After reading your last issue, I pulled up my tape of Starrcade '86. My God. How things have changed in just 6 years. What happened? Why did this one tape have more heat than every pay-per-view show of 1992 combined? Where did the magic go? Will it ever come back? Pete Sekelarak. Round Lake Beach, Illinois. When I keep hearing about WCW's plight of producing so much television product, I keep thinking, why don't they use an alternative source available to them? By this I mean using their working relationship with New Japan. They could take the Power Hour and use the show to showcase foreign talent. They could show WCW wrestlers in matches abroad, show wrestlers like Chris Benoit, Dan Crawford and Doug Furnas wrestling in Mexico or Japan, and then bring them in and they would mean something. They really need to showcase outside talent before they bring them in for clashes and pay-per-view shows, so they don't waste that talent as they've done in the past, and put them in what are meaningless matches to the general audience. You've noted a number of occasions how WCW has squandered the opportunity to show its wrestlers working before huge international audiences. This would make the word world more meaningful in the title World Championship Wrestling. Greg Good. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What are the chances of WCW coming back to Los Angeles? Why is Watts giving up on the West Coast? I couldn't believe it when he canceled the July card at the Forum. The least he could have done was to honor the commitment. I also couldn't believe he let Terry Taylor go. He's a great wrestler who has been treated shabbily by both the WWF and WCW. It really makes me mad, but I guess that's what will continue to happen until there is a wrestlers union. Carol Chabula, Orange, California. DM, there are no scheduled WCW dates on the West Coast for the remainder of 1992. It's simply economics. I doubt WCW has run a profitable Los Angeles house show or West Coast tour in years. The interest isn't there right now, and the current regime, whose main goal is stabilizing the bottom line, realizes until there is interest, there is no point in coming when they can lose far less money promoting shows geographically closer to home. I agree with many of the business comments made in the recent Observers concerning WCW. To stay competitive as a television entity, WCW has to decide who its top stars are and pay them accordingly. Keeping everyone on a guaranteed contract is foolish from a business standpoint. At the same time, there are 8 to 10 wrestlers that are of enough value they need to be kept on guarantees so they don't leave. WCW has to decide if it wants to stay viable or it wants to become a fourth-rate regional, which is what will happen if they lose the Steiners, Anderson, Eaton, Wyndham and the rest leave when their contracts expire. Another idea to boost income for wrestlers would be to take 2 nights per week on the hotline and rotate the guests and have wrestlers, as special guest hosts for phone calls, and cut them in on a percentage of the take for the night. Injuries and rehab must be covered by the promotion out of fairness to the wrestlers. WCW had the talent, but the office didn't know how to run the show. Now they have the office people who can run the show, but in 6 months may have no talent. Bob Ivy. Starkville, Mississippi. Blood. Although blood is a controversial subject, I find wrestling much less exciting without it. I find it hard to believe that anyone who has followed this sport for years wouldn't feel ripped off by cage matches, chain matches, death matches, etc. without any blood. I hope that Bill Watts will bring juice back to house shows where I know that one seat that was filled thousands of times before that will continue to be empty. Jeff Wilson. Columbia, South Carolina. I'm disappointed that you haven't come down harder against blading. I'm all for excitement, but I'm dead set against the possibility of acquiring AIDS. No expert can give an ironclad guarantee against acquiring AIDS through coming into contact with someone else's blood. Dr. Richard Siegel. Bethpage, New York. Steroids. Congratulations for your continuing excellent articles on steroid abuse in pro wrestling. I thought you might be interested in some news on the shocking death of John Kordic, an NHL player whose rights belong to the Edmonton Oilers. He was only 27. At first it was reported Kordic died of heart failure after a fight involving 10 police officers in Quebec. But it is now believed that anabolic steroids were the major cause of his death. His coaches knew as far back as 1986 that he was on the juice and basically encouraged him. We now must ask how many NHL players use steroids. Unlike even the WWF, the NHL is completely in the dark ages when it comes to any kind of drug rehabilitation or testing. In fact, the NHL has suspended players for 40 games just for being caught with an ounce of pot. While I realize John Kordic would be a virtual unknown to many wrestling fans, he was a household name in Ontario and Quebec. Although he was a hitman and NHL thug, he may also be the tip of the iceberg since almost all the kids in the NHL being brought up have to be well over 6 foot and in excess of 200 pounds. A parallel to him could be drawn with Rick McGraw in that it will take the death of a star hockey player or wrestler to change things, while the death of lesser lights allows those in charge to continue to bury the problems. Kordic's death shows that leisure drugs, alcohol and steroids can be a fatal combination, and clearly that is also a part of many wrestlers' lifestyles. If you make American wrestlers aware of Kordic's death, it may be a good thing. Michael Cannon. Mississauga, Ontario. DM. Kordic's autopsy listed the cause of death as lung failure due to a heart malfunction. The doctors felt the reason for the lung failure could have been a side effect of long-term steroid use. Kordic was also well known as a heavy cocaine user, and cocaine is a much higher risk drug when it comes to possibility of sudden death from heart malfunction than steroids.